Today's episode, we're going to be taking the door I've just glued up, cutting it down to size, getting hinges fitted. They're different hinges to what I normally use. I'll be making a little jig to cut them in, trim the lock in, get it swinging basically in this frame and prepping it for painting probably. First off, I've got to get the door onto the saw, so create a good space. Obviously the saw references off this bottom surface it's sat on, and the wedges and all the glue residue on the outside of the door is affecting the cut. So just get some blocks to a known measurement, so it's a bit of a random measurement, but if I sit it on these blocks, then raise the cut for the top of the door, the amount of these blocks to what I need it, then it's just, I don't have to clean the edges of the door style up. It's a really quick way getting a finish. One there, so just raise that one up. Just make sure it's sat on a bit of door style that's not got any glue residue. You can do the same thing with the track saw, to be fair. I'm cutting this on the panel saw with the face that is going to be the shut edges of the door. So this is the inside face of the door facing the machine. And that side you get the most accurate cut on. If there's any deviation in the blade, then it will be on the side that is hidden within the rebate. So you get a much more accurate cut. Cut the door off to height. I've got to get because I've made the top rail taller than it is in the finished drawing, and we've obviously got to have a bit of a gap cut on for the door to open. To get that cut in the exact right space, so these glazing bars and all these sight lines all marry up through the frame, I've got to measure my door gap, which is a 3mm packer, and then I'm just measuring down to, in this case, a laser line, and then the same measurement off that top rail down to the measurement line. The difference between the two is the amount I can sort of work out on the door and cut down that line nice and square. So that's giving me that pencil line on here. Joy of this panel saw is that it does a perfectly square cut. So fitting a door like this, it's just the dream. You sit it down on that bottom, bring it up to this mark and just cut. Used to spend ages trying to shoot doors and frames in the workshop on a planer, when just cut them on the panel saw if you've got one, and it's the dream. Flip the head round on the saw. I spent 3 days setting this up to be perfect. It's not the easiest thing to align. And I can just slide that door along to a measurement. This door's 2 meters and 50 as a finish cut. I'm setting the gauge here on 1050. It locks as it flips over. And just bring the door up to that, like so. If I cut in that position there, it's going to be 1.50 meters. So just move the saw along to the next stop. Which is plus 1 meter exactly. That haunch. That haunch is beautiful. Stupidly perfect. I'd say The mortise and tenon is pretty strong, considering it broke the bit of wood, knocked the joint out of there, and it's only 15mm thick. It's pretty good bit of stuff, that. This saw is only designed to cut 55mm thick, and it's a 58mm door, so it only just goes through. You have to be dead careful when you're sort of like plunging it in and down, because it catches on the entry to the cut because the door's too thick. I think it's actually only designed to cut 50mm, so it doesn't go past these metal lugs that are designed to keep the material on. So I removed the one out the middle and cut the end one down, I think, so there's no roller in the middle, just so I could cut doors upon it, because it's probably one of the main things I used it for when I first got it, was squaring up joinery. I'd fit all my casements and everything on this machine. You just cut them to size, belt sand the edge, and you've got perfectly square, parallel and fitting joinery. Works really well. It doesn't take up a lot of space like a panel saw does. Like, it's quite compact against the workshop. It's also easy. Like, you wouldn't put that door on a flat panel saw and try and push it through past the blade. It'd be a nightmare to do on your own. It's dead simple on here. It's really comfortable working with something this size on a saw like this. Judge a door by these haunch cuts and quality of the joints. I mean, it's looking pretty sweet. You're 6 inches away at 4K. So that's pretty nice. So just gonna blast over the faces with a sander, get rid of any glue bits, clean the inside edges out, take the sharp edges off all of this. There's a few of these glazing bars want like a V groove creating. I'm not going to do it on all of them, just the ones that interact with these edge pieces that have got the round over on. If I put a round on that bar, it'd make it too much of like a half round, and it wouldn't match. So they're going to end up looking exactly like this from here when I've got the 2 beads in place. That bit of wood in the middle is the centre of that glazing bar, so got to be exactly the same as that. So they're not going to have the half round, it's just going to be at the interaction with these components. Now it's sat down flat, I'm just going to give it a quick blast over with the sander and take any sharp edges off. Seems to be reaching more and more for the trend stuff. I do get it free, but it's really nice paper. I love the thicker, harder paper. It tends to hold its grip for longer, its sharpness. Takes a bit of practice to use the orbital on a glazing bar like that. You've got to get your pad absolutely free where it's going to go. Sort of drop it on in that orientation. You want it almost running, so sort of like spark it up and then pull the trigger once it sort of touches, so it sparks up just as it touches, and then never go into an edge. Never like drive your sander into an edge, because you'll always catch it and damage these edges. Always start on the edge, work it round a bit, and then work your way off them like that. I was just going to do this bit and not film it, but it's stupid little things like this that take up half an hour of your day and nobody will ever appreciate or see it unless you didn't do it. But yeah, where did that half an hour go? What were you doing for half an hour? Chiseling a little round on the end of a glazing bar. So yeah, I thought I'd include it in the video because time just disappears on stuff like this. When I used to do a lot of these, I always used to sort of set my sandpaper up where it's comfy. Got loads of glazing bars to sand. Do all of this one. Do all of that face on every bar, which was comfy for right-handed. And do all of that face, which is again easy. And then either turn the thing round, or because it's so heavy, we'll just walk around the other way. Do exactly the same thing again. It's the same two easy angles. Do the opposite. So. And a sharp edge off the sides. This customer likes quite a heavy round off the corners. I'd normally use a router for production work, but it just looks a bit too routed. I know that sounds silly, but it just looks a bit too sort of perfectly rounded if you do use a router for round over. So I like to just do it by hand with a block, and you get you definitely do get a more hand finished look to it. There's also practically zero risk of you causing an issue sanding that by hand. If you run a router down there and there's something where the bearing sits, or you put a leading edge bevel on the door and you're routering it after that, you can notch the router bit in and cause yourself some trouble with that. So there's no risk using a sanding pad to create a round over on your door. Film a bit late there, but if I see any imperfections while I'm working on a door or something high end, I sort them out straight away, because it's dead easy to leave them to the end and think I'll do them a filling at once, and then you miss stuff, and then you find it in your next coat of paint or your next finish coat, and then you go back a step because you have to fill it, wait for it to dry, sand it, and then primer or whatever again. So if you see an imperfection, deal with it straight away, and then you're always kind of on top of it. You get a better job, you don't miss anything then. While I wait for that to dry, I'm just going to use this offcut of plywood to make up some jigs for the hinges that I'm going to be using, because it's a taller hinge than I've used before. So I've got to make a new jig. If you've not seen me make router hinge jigs, then I'll leave a link down below to a really good method for making these up. Try them out on one of my offcuts. I told you these blocks of wood would be handy to get out at the start of the job. Essential. These hinges are a bit weird. They've got a crank on the knuckle so that the leaf comes in. I can't think of why anyone would want that. Normally your hinge leaf is flush from the outside, so the leaves follow on from the thickness of the knuckle. But to create a gap on the door there, you've got to not chop that leaf in as much. It's a little bit disappointed in them. Yeah, see how many? Oh, it's a little bit gappy. It's not far off. And they're closed up. We're about, I'd say that's a 3.5mm gap. I'm aiming for around 3mm, so I'll just tweak my router in a little bit. Just got to bear in mind at this stage, we're going to have, when we paint it, to be paint in both housings and paint on this side of the frame and on the door. When I do my proper spray finishing, that paint coating can be 1/2 mil thick, so you could lose 1 mil of that gap in paint, but you also add a bit of paint onto your hinge housings as well. So what you gain in paint in losing in the gap, it also packs the hinge out. So you need to make your door a little bit smaller finish size than you want sort of gap in your frame, because you're allowing for 1 mil of paint on the door. Yeah, pretty nice. Nice result on that. And my filler's not even dry yet, and I've made that jig, cut them 2 hinges in, so that's how quick it is. I've got to strip the lacquer off this and age these hinges down as well. Proper hand aged finish. I was looking something up on the drawing earlier and just left it on this view on the screen. How cool does that look? That's like the coolest picture of this door I think I've seen. Sand the edges in with a belt sander. Let's get them sharp edges off. We'll do the draft strips on the bottom in a minute. That's the hinge side sorted. Just got a leading edge to put on the opening side. Over. And just use my planer with a 2mm packer to create a leading edge down the latch side of the door. Important when you get to this last bit, don't lean on the front of your planer. All your weight wants to be right at the back here so that you don't dive in. If anything, you want that to be slightly cut less, and you can just skim it in with the belt sander afterwards. Right, might as well sort this lock out while I've got the door this way up. So a little tip when you're working on a mortise lock or a sash lock, throw the lock, even if you've screwed it in place, especially a sash lock, the door can't shut and lock you in the room, which is way more common than you might think, and you'll have to scrabble around for something like to operate the spindle to let you out the room. And also, if your mortise housing is a little bit tight, if you drilled it by hand, then it gives you something to grip hold of, be able to remove and put the lock in and out. So yeah, just always throw your lock first out. Good habit to get into. Make sure that's in the right way up. I'm just going to mark the top somewhere in the middle of the housing. Couple of lines. Then I've got a jig, because I've used these locks before. I used the sash lock ones, but I've just shortened it a bit by cutting a bit off there and gluing it in to suit my deadlock. Clamp it down and router that out. Made this jig in exactly the same way as the hinge jig, so just cut a piece of wood, the thickness of whatever you want to chop out, which is this bit here. Glue it around the thing that you're going to chop out with some super glue and activator to make it go off double quick. And then just use a flush trim router bit. Got to age this plate down as well, so it can go in the tub with the rest of them. Looks about right to me. you go. Perfect a fit of a lock you're ever going to get. Right, let's chop this keyhole in. Got to check from the edges, the two different edges, how deep the faceplate is off of them surfaces. So like on a square that over there, the faceplate is 2mm down from this edge. Then I'll put the centre of the square, the centre of the faceplate. It's only 1mm down off of this edge, and by the time the square's referencing on there, it's pretty much flush from the edge that my square is going to reference off to the top of this faceplate on the outside of the door. And that's important because it affects how you mark it out. Measure on centre of the keyhole. I've been through all this on my channel, so it's 20mm from the bottom of the lock to the centre of the keyhole, and the faceplate to the bottom of the lock is 29mm, so it's 49mm up from there to the centre of my keyhole. I can square them lines over very, very lightly so that I've not got much sanding to do. And use me combi square to take that height from the faceplate to the lock. So on this side, I want to be just a couple of mil beyond it. That'll be the centre line of my lock, and on the back edge it wants to be the same measurement as the lock is. For a traditional key lock like this, you have to check your key and what size collars it's got on it, but I'm using a 9mm drill bit. I'll drill the other side. Let's just check that. Let's see if we're in the right locale. Beautiful. And tend to freestyle the keyhole shaping to what looks good by hand. You can flare them if you're feeling really fancy. Flare the ends off. I tend to just use a 1/8 chisel. Make sure you've took your lock out, else you're going to ruin your 1/8 chisel. Then like a 5/8 or a 3/8 chisel. They tend to be slimmer in height than the bigger chisels, so paring that down at a bit of an angle to the shape, whatever shape you want. If you get the front right, you can kind of hack the back out afterwards. How's that looking? Can you see through it? Before I flip that door around and cut the other keyhole in, this is the latch we're going to be putting on the door. So these are very, very simple, hopefully very reliable traditional latch. It looked ages for one of these, and the customer actually found this one, so kudos to them. Yeah, just got a very simple mechanism, so hopefully it'll be pretty bomb proof and pretty reliable as a latch. It's nice to have a lock come to bits and it not go ping as you take the cover off. Some of them take a bit of working out. Not mega happy with how much throw is on this latch in terms of when you've got a door gap on there and your keep is sat like this. There's only about 5 or 6mm of latch in that keep, so if it's a problem, I did see while I was in there that we could file the pull down and the latch would then rest with a bit more exposed latch. That's good to know for the future. Lovely light latch, just what you want for a heavy door. It's just an easy thing to open. It's even got a bit of inbuilt antique wobble. I'm not so keen on that, but I guess once that spindle is through the door, it won't wobble so much because it'll be in the 2 roses. Right, let's get that one chopped in. It needs a little housing cutting out for this bit of brass that just lips around the edge of the door. So get that good old degreasing, because normally everything ends up covered in oil. Just about there somewhere. On the centre of that rail. Do we want to go off the bead or do we want to go off that rebate? Well, from the other side, it's that one, isn't it? So we'll do it there. Makes more sense on the outside of the door. Gently square that line down. Let it sit in square. Just going to dis-sand this because the actual piece of brass is sat at an angle like that. So when I chop my housing, I'd have to do like a dovetailed housing for it to get to sit neat against this edge. So I'm just going to take it back so it's flat, like so. Start in from them ends a little bit. Choose the router really. Stupid boy. One of them horrible little details you get to be fitting on site right at the end of the day, and you'd rush it and it'd ruin the whole door because you'd have like a slightly tapered housing and everyone would see it right over the handle. It's usually about this point you realise you're hanging the door the wrong way around. Let's get in there. Get in there. That's nice. That'll do. That's perfect. Don't put your finished screws in until you've finished. So flip the door over and sort the hinges out now. So hinge position, I think I'm going to go with 6 down and 8 inches up. Normally I'd do like 4.5 and 9, which is quite traditional for around here and what I was taught. 5 and 10 is sort of another common hinge arrangement, but these hinges, because they're 6 inch, they're quite a long piece of brass, just looks better being the same distance away from the corner as the hinge. So that's why like 4.5 works with a 4-inch hinge, because it's enough away from the end of the door, equivalent to how big the hinge is. So I've gone 6 down, and I want as much strength in these hinges as possible because it's such a wide door. I don't really want to lift that one up to sort of 10 or 12 inches up in the door because it'll be over here somewhere. So I've kept it just 8 inches up, which is 200mm. So 150 down, 200 up. It looks quite good to me. It sort of suits that door, and the middle one is obviously in the middle between the 2 hinges. You boy. It's alright. I don't like self-centering drill bit, so just use a normal bit. Slightly bias it. Say if it was a 5mm hole, centre is 2.5, I would go 2mm from the back edge to the centre of the hole. So it's just slightly offset. And if you start the drill and it goes in the wrong spot, just angle it to where you want to go, drill a little bit further, then as you're spinning it, pull the drill over and it will move in the hole. Push this door in, see if it fits, mark the hinges. Good from this side. Really nice. Those hinge positions, I'm not going to mark them quick. glad I'm not outside doing green oak framing at the minute. It's horrific out there. Drill ready with the screw in it. There's screwing them out. There you go. It's not bad for a first fit, is it? Going to get this latch chopped in because we've got to chop the keep into the frame. It's not ideal, but we've got to do a neat housing and also set this lock position and chop that in as well, so I can do that very quickly. Awful cold. My whole face has ached for about 3 days. All my teeth have been aching. I've got a toothache in my whole mouth. Made a little jig, just 5 minutes, and it perfectly matches this latch because it's a bit of a curve around this edge, and I've got to hollow it out for the whole underside of it so that it's got to look really neat and be a painted finish, and the router's going to provide a better finish than chiselling on that section with a load of sand in. So I can just clamp that in place. I've got my tick lines. I've had a little practice in a bit of plywood. Joy of a router jig like that is it takes seconds to router something around like that. Got that jig fitted. I can set my router depth and offer this one up to the actual latch. Make sure that the depths and everything are right and it's going to sit nicely against the latch. Oh, beautiful. If you chop these in and you're a tiny bit out with the fit on your latch, I've found the best way. Quite often these back edges are uneven, so you can just sand a bit off the brass on the back edges to adjust your fit if you're really close. There's a little bit of free play in there, but I've only got a 6-inch bit of draft strip in. By the time you draft strip the whole door, you get quite a lot of resistance from that draft strip. Just touching the draft strip there. We've got 2 mil of pressure on it, so I think I'll leave it at that and adjust it when we actually do the final fit if I need to. So a big door like that's going to get slammed a few times. Seems pretty solid to me. Maybe half a mil too loose, but like I say, when I've got full draft strip round, I think we'll find that out. Speed up the process of fitting the keep for this deadbolt. I've just glued another little block in the same jig, and I can centralise that on my deadbolt there. Put myself a pencil line on this face. Then I want to come just 2 mil, and then the door's set in a couple of mil. Then if I put a couple of 2 mil packers, a couple of 1 mil packers in line with the lock, should give me that 2 mil that the door sits in on the frame. And we're spot on in the middle of that latch, so there's no measuring or marking out, just trying to chisel the lines. It's all done and dusted within sort of a couple of minutes. You have to be a little bit careful with this draft strip groove when you're routing. I routed up on this edge cutting in because your router cut is spinning this way and then climbed cut into this sort of edge here, where if you just routed up, pulled the router over to this side and routed up that edge there, this grain can tend to peel away and you might get a bit of a a dodgy bit of breakout along this edge here, and the same for this one down here. So I tend to start in the middle, router up and climb cut your way around the outside of the housing, and you get a bit better chance of having a nice sharp edge. And I've also learnt not to use the corner chisel to take these corners out, because where this housing is missing, you're missing the shoulder, your corner chisel will push further up and chop a nice chunk out right where you don't want it. Beautiful. Look at it, what a terrible design. You design these products, but... doorknobs we're going to use have just turned up, and they're the threaded type that screw into the end of the doorknob. But because we're using a rim lock, the square bit of the spindle that sits in the middle has obviously got to be to one side of the door. And then this threaded section that screws into the handle, it wants to screw in a decent way to stop it sort of racking. It's not even poking out the other side of the door when you get that square spindle in line with the rim lock. So I'm going to search, see if you can buy an extended version, but they almost still don't seem long enough. So I'm just going to ask the legend that is George next door, see if you can TIG weld this bit of spindle onto that one and extend it by sort of 50mm. So go, ironmongery is fitted. I'm not overly happy with that lock. It's a bit terrible, really. But we wanted a 4-inch lock so that you're well away from the door frame when you're trying to get your keys in. There's nothing worse than trying to squeeze your key in. I'm going to stand behind it, I'll show you. So there's nothing worse than trying to squeeze your key in next to such a deep piece of frame. So we wanted to keep the key as far away as possible, just so it's nice to use, and that's why it's above as well. It's sort of a reasonable height to get the key in and out the door. But the choice of 4-inch locks is quite few and far between when you want a sash lock and a deadlock all on the same key. So that's why we ended up with these ones. They're not fit and finish isn't overly great, but yeah, there we go, all finished and looking smart. They pretty pleased with all the housings on there, and that's the keeps. Draft strips will run into them nicely and just stop. Got loads of other work to do, like sanding, take all this ironmongery off, sort the little panels that are going around. Like a little infill panel in there that's raised off the surface. Get all that painted a couple of times. So not really much point in filming that. It's all a bit boring stuff, and I'll be a day or so sorting that out. So next video will probably be finishing the door, finish painting the door, and finish painting the frame.